So in the last video, we created a issue in our own program. We made a field private, but then we made two public methods which got the name and set the name. And this went against the purpose of what we need, right? So the obvious answer would be, well, remove the set name. And you're like, okay, I'll remove the set name. I'll notice that I got some errors because set name doesn't exist, right? And we could remove this. But now the problem is that when I created these objects and then I wanted to read the names, there was no names. Null, 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 null. So what can we do to fix this issue? Well, there is another thing that we haven't mentioned yet in our class creation, our blueprint creation. And that's the initial rules that I want it to have when I create an object. When I create that person object, what is the rules, or what is I need to do for it to run correctly when it gets initialized? Right now, when it gets created and initialized, there is no rules. It's the default setting. It's called a default or empty constructor. Right? So there's actually a third thing that we have here, and it's constructors. And this constructor is basically, you could think of it, a rule for creating that object. So think of it more like what my object requires to do before it's being utilized by someone. Give you an example here. Before my object person is used, I need to make sure they have a name. So we need to enforce whoever creates a person that they specify a name. And this is pretty easy. We do this with our constructors. So first thing first, let me go ahead and write here what we were missing before. Constructor. And we could go and do it. So how do we create constructor? Well, we just create another method like we've been doing, except this method is a bit different. Again, we're going to specify the access modifier. So we're going to say public. Then this is where it's a bit different. A constructor will never return anything. So it doesn't have a return type. We're going to keep that blank, empty, not there. It's not void. It's just not there. And the constructor needs to have the same name as the class. Person. And you'll notice there's no errors. This class, you'll notice it's already being used. It's orangish. And you could see that's being used in these two cases. If you want to do the same thing, hold down Control, click on person. You'll notice where the usage is being done. Now, when this new keyword happens, you'll notice there's a parentheses. Well, you're calling the constructor. You're creating the object with new, and you're calling the constructor as soon as it's done. What this is the method that's there by default. The method by default constructor is empty. Okay? And this is important to understand. The moment you create a constructor of your own, the default constructor is gone. Now, in this case, I created the same thing as a default constructor, which has nothing in it, doesn't do anything. If I want a name, well, I'm going to enforce that they supply a name, and that when they do, I'm going to make this name equal this name. Notice that the moment I change this constructor's signature, right, the parameters, it became an error here. You could see those two red squiggly lines. Well, because we need to supply a name. Inside the parameter, you could press Control P to get the parameters required. And you could see here, it requires a string for the name. So we're going to say Reza. And over here, we're going to say Jason. Okay. So now when I run my application, we got the correct names. Hey. So then you would say, well, doesn't that defeat the purpose? I thought we were making it private, but now the name is again public. Well, actually, it's not. When the person object is being created, this method will be called, and it will only be called once and never again. Okay? If you call it again, well, that means you're creating a new object. You won't be able to call this method again. Can we try and call it from a different method? Person. And then we give something. And you'll notice it's giving you an error. Method call expected. This is not a method. This is a constructor. So we can't do that. So the name is actually not accessible after the creation of the object. Well, you're going to tell me, well, we're going to just call it again. New person. And we're going to pass some other name. Mon, let's say. Well, again, this is great. You did change the name, but you also changed the whole object. Remember that the new keyword creates that object, creates a new object. So you were not redefining the value of name. We created a brand new object. And this could be bad because we're going to lose all the values we had so far. If we had any other attributes that had some values, well, they're gone, right? So we got to think about that. Cool. So now what happened is our constructor put some rules on creating a person, which basically says I require a name. I could also specify other things, add more parameters, specify them, etc. And we limited the access by just having a getter for the name, but no setters. So the name could never be changed again. Cool. I'll see you guys in the next video.